What's up, guys? This is Mr. Eldridge, and in today's video, we begin looking at Unit 8 of the College Board Key Concepts. Unit 8 is 1945 to 1980. So in that, we begin looking at the Cold War. As the war was drawing to its end, the Allied powers, including the United States, England, and the Soviet Union, had already started to show signs of distrust between one another. Already considered a paranoid leader, Stalin felt that the capitalist nations were working against him and purposely entered the war late. Additionally, Stalin was isolated at meetings of the Big Three at both Yalta and Potsdam because he did not speak English. The sides had already agreed to temporarily occupy various zones of Europe and to let each area vote and decide its own government and its own economic system. However, very quickly, Stalin began to use the Soviet military to bully Eastern European countries into communist puppet governments. The years 1947 to 1991 were defined by the United States and the Soviet Union fighting each other indirectly across the globe, trying to stop communism, i.e. the idea of a Cold War. No longer able to fight one another due to mutually assured destruction, the United States and the Soviet Union fought indirectly through proxy wars and espionage. For proxy wars, the United States or the Soviet Union supported either anti-communist or pro-communist groups through supplies or financial aid. To provide this aid and stop aid for the other side, both the United States and the Soviet Union used espionage through organizations such as the CIA and the KGB to spy and sabotage one another. Originating in Greece and Turkey in 1947, the United States determined its position, also known as the Truman Doctrine, which focused on containing communism and preventing its spread. Seeing the threat of Soviet-backed communism spreading, Western governments feared communism in Western Europe. With destroyed cities and countryside and the Great Depression fresh in their memory, many countries had substantial socialist and communist movements. To counter this, the United States employed the Marshall Plan to provide billions of dollars to Europe to stabilize their capitalist democratic countries and prevent them from falling to communist uprisings or bordering regimes. After the American and British zones unified and angered by attempts to stop the spread of communism, Stalin blocked off the capital city of Berlin in 1947, denying access to the roads into the cities. The blockade of Berlin, which had American and British personnel, is considered by most to be the beginnings of the Cold War. Despite the Marshall Plan stabilizing Western economies, the United States and Western Europe were still nervous about the spread of communism. That's when we see the beginnings of this idea of containment. This containment policy meant that communism must be prevented from spreading, and the United States must use its economic and military power to aid those struggling against it. To protect Western democracies from Soviet military interference and contain communism, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, was founded in 1949. In response, the Soviets formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955, which was essentially the same concept, but applied to the Eastern Bloc of nations. The Cold War was defined by a series of indirect fighting between the First World countries, the United States and its allies, and the Second World countries, the Soviet Union and its allies. The United States and its allies often supported democratic or capitalist countries with supplies, officers, money, advice, and even its own military. The Soviet Union did the same for communist countries, but neither the United States or the Soviet Union fought directly. Some examples of these proxy wars are the Civil War in Greece and Turkey in 1947, the Chinese Civil War from 1945 to 1949, the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, of course, the Vietnam War from 1954 to 1975, and finally, the Soviet-Afghan War from 1979 to 1989. That leads us now to our discussion of the Korean War. The Korean War was a conflict between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, i.e. North Korea, and the Republic of Korea, South Korea, in which at least 2.5 million people lost their lives. The war reached international proportions in June of 1950, when North Korea, supplied and advised by the Soviet Union, invaded South Korea. The United Nations, with the United States as the principal participant, joined the war on the side of the South Koreans. And the People's Republic of China came to North Korea's aid. After more than 1 million combat casualties had been suffered on both sides, the fighting ended in July of 1953 with a truce between Korea that still establishes today the separation between the two hostile states. Negotiations in 1954 produced no further agreement, and the front line has been accepted ever since as the de facto boundary between North and South Korea. Finally, we need to have a discussion about the domestic Cold War. While both the Democrats and the Republicans broadly opposed communism, the United States in the mid-20th century, there was a notable difference with the intensity in which both parties pursued potential communist and communist sympathizers. Generally speaking, members of the conservative right vehemently opposed communism and ruthlessly sought to expel potential communists. Democrats took a much lighter approach, often criticized for, quote, being too soft on communists. The attitudes of conservatives changed once the Canadian government uncovered a Soviet spy ring that was responsible for leaking government secrets, including those linked to the Manhattan Project. American attitudes shifted more to the reactionary radical right. The House Un-American Activities Committee was created in 1938 as a security department meant to monitor communist activities in the United States. These duties included investigating any potential communist or anarchist within the United States government, as well as establishing and enforcing loyalty oaths among federal and state departments. Key members would include the chairman, Martin Dies, and then, of course, future president of the United States, Richard Nixon. The hunt for communists soon devolved into a witch hunt following a few legitimate leads. While actual communist spies were largely uprooted, Republican hardliners continued to pursue any potential threats. One such individual was Senator Joseph McCarthy, who embarked on a largely evidence-less campaign against anyone he suspected of being a communist. This, quote, Red Scare, or the Second Red Scare, was defined by McCarthyism, meaning many individuals were accused and labeled without sufficient evidence as Americans panicked to rid the United States of alleged communists. While Senator McCarthy experienced some initial success, he soon became exposed after accusing many military and high-ranking officials of being communist or communist sympathizers without any evidence, and as a result, largely lost his following. However, the efforts of McCarthy and others did plenty of damage before their ousting. Many celebrities in Hollywood, members were blacklisted for speaking out against the actions of Joseph McCarthy and others. The Hollywood 10, for example, was a short film in which 10 Hollywood figures condemns McCarthyism and the Hollywood blacklistings. These individuals themselves then became victims of McCarthyism. They were blacklisted and were unable to find work in Hollywood from that point on. As mentioned previously, this radical right movement to eliminate communism had devolved into a witch hunt that ruined lives on the basis of accusation and considered disloyalty to American ideals as dissent. Thank you so much for paying attention to this video. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and do so now. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.